Welcome to the Live Free, Love Life podcast, where we discuss how to create more freedom so we can love our lives no matter what we're going through. Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to today's episode of Live Free, Love Life. Today, we're going to talk about the power of letting go and how we can find freedom through detachment. In our fast-paced, achievement-oriented world, we are constantly bombarded with the message that we need to hold on tightly to the things in our lives. We're told to aggressively pursue our goals, to possess more and more material goods, to cling to relationships and identities. The underlying assumption is that the more we can grasp and control, the more secure and fulfilled we will be. However, the spiritual and philosophical traditions of the world tell a very different story. From Buddhism's teaching of non attachment to the Stoic principle of amor fati, which is the love of one's fate, to the Christian adage to let go and let God, the message is clear. True freedom and contentment are found not through white knuckle grasping, but through the graceful art of letting go. One of the key reasons we struggle so mightily with letting go is the very nature of the human mind and ego. As renowned psychologist Eric Fromm wrote, modern man is drinking himself out of existence with the perpetual chase for possessions and recipes for happiness. This desperate grasping is rooted in our deep-seated fear of impermanence and lack of control. Attachment researcher Mary Main has found that from a young age, humans develop an innate need for an attachment figure, whether that's a parent, a partner, or possession, that provides a sense of security and stability. When we feel that attachment threatened, it triggers a primal fear response. Main said, the experience of loss or separation is painful because it reactivates the fear of total abandonment and helplessness. This explains why letting go can feel so threatening. It requires us to face the unsettling reality that nothing lasts forever. As Tibetan Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron observed, it's our fear of impermanence that makes us so tightly cling to ourselves and our possessions. We construct elaborate psychological defenses to avoid confronting the truth of change and uncertainty. Additionally, psychologists point to the role of the ego in fueling our attachment. As author and speaker Eckhart Tolle explains, the ego seeks to preserve itself at all costs, leading us to frantically cling to identities, relationships, and material things as a way to prop up our fragile sense of self. Letting go, then, feels kind of like a psychic death, a loss of the familiar that our mind desperately tries to avoid. These deep-seated psychological drivers make the practice of non-attachment a challenging but essential task. As pioneering psychologist Irvin Yalom wrote, the therapist's role is to help the patient relinquish old, counterproductive ways of being and to create new, more fulfilling ways of engaging with the world. Ultimately, the freedom that comes from letting go requires us to face our fears, and transcend the limits of the ego and make peace with the inherent flux of existence. So let's talk about the burden of attachment. Attachment, in the deepest sense, means identifying ourselves and our happiness with particular people, things, outcomes, or identities. It's the persistent and often subconscious belief that our well being hinges on maintaining a firm grip on the external circumstances of our lives. When we're attached, we feel anxious, fearful, and insecure because we're constantly concerned with protecting what we've claimed as our own. This attachment manifests in many areas. Perhaps we're deeply attached to our career identity and the status it brings us, terrified of the thought of changing paths. Or we may be clinging to a romantic relationship, unable to accept the natural ebbs and flows, and we're willing to contort ourselves to keep it alive. Some of us are hoarders, amassing possessions we don't truly need out of a nagging fear of lack. Others are workaholics, driven by the deep-seated belief that our value and security lie in our productivity and achievements. Regardless of the specific form it takes, attachment is a heavy burden that robs us of our freedom. When we are in its grip, We become slaves to our own insecurities and desires. We expend immense psychic energy trying to control the uncontrollable, to maintain a tenuous grasp on people and things that are inherently impermanent. This leads to chronic stress, anxiety, and a persistent sense that something is missing. In contrast, the practice of non attachment, letting go and releasing our tight grip on life, is the gateway to true freedom and fulfillment. When we let go, we stop struggling against the natural flow of change and impermanence. We make peace with the fact that nothing lasts forever and that trying to force permanence on the fleeting and ever evolving nature of existence is a losing battle. This doesn't mean we become passive or indifferent. Rather, non attachment allows us to engage with life more fully and authentically. Instead of clinging neurotically to our possessions, relationships, and identities, we can hold them lightly, appreciating them for the temporary gifts that they are. We can pursue our goals and dreams with passion and vigor while also maintaining the wisdom to detach from the outcomes. And we can love deeply without the constant fear of loss. Ultimately, the path of non attachment leads to a profound inner freedom. When we let go of our rigid attachments, we no longer feel at the mercy of external circumstances. We become more resilient in the face of change and loss. We can roll with the punches of life, responding with equanimity rather than panic. And we open ourselves up to the pure joy of simply being, unburdened by the weight of our endless grasping. So, where might we begin the journey of letting go? Here are some of the key areas where attachment commonly manifests and how we can start to cultivate the freedom of non attachment. Area number one, possessions and wealth. Many of us are deeply attached to our material goods, our homes, cars, gadgets, and collections of stuff. We invest a huge amount of psychic energy into acquiring, maintaining, and protecting these possessions, believing they are the key to our security and happiness. However, the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. Can I say that again? Because this is pretty much the whole entire point of this podcast, the whole message and theme of this podcast. Freedom is the only condition for happiness. It's so good. Letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. When we let go of our attachment to material things, we free ourselves from the endless cycle of wanting, acquiring, and worrying. We can start to see our possessions as transient tools to be used and enjoyed rather than a sense of identity and status. This doesn't mean we need to live our lives devoid of material comforts. Rather, it's about cultivating a light, flexible relationship with our belongings. We can practice gratitude for what we have while also being willing to let go of what no longer serves us. Regular decluttering, charitable giving, and simply being mindful of our consumption habits can help us foster this spirit of non attachment. One powerful example is the story of Fumio Sasaki, a Japanese man who dramatically simplified his life by getting rid of over 90% of his possessions. In his book, Goodbye Things, Sasaki describes how this journey of radical minimalism liberated him from the weight of material attachment. He no longer felt burdened by the constant upkeep and organization of his belongings and found that he had more time, energy, and mental space for the things that truly mattered to him. Sasaki's story illustrates how letting go of our stuff can unlock a profound sense of freedom and lightness. Okay, area number two, relationships. Our relationships with other people are another major locus of attachment. We cling to romantic partners, family members, and friends, terrified of the pain of loss or abandonment. We try to control and manipulate others, shape them into our ideal versions, or hold them to unrealistic expectations. And when they inevitably change or drift away, we are devastated. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron eloquently describes this tendency. We think that if we just get the right job, if we just find the perfect romantic partner, if we just get the kids and the house and the dog, then we'll be happy. The underlying assumption is that if we can just get the right conditions, we'll be whole and content. But of course, this is an illusion. No person or relationship can ever truly complete us or provide a permanent source of fulfillment. Instead, the path of non attachment in relationships involves honoring the fluid, ever changing nature of human connection. It means letting go of the fantasy of perfect, permanent bonds and accepting that all relationships have an ebb and flow. We can still love deeply and commit fully, but with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. We recognize that the people in our lives are not ours to possess or control, but rather precious, fleeting fellow travelers on the journey of life. One powerful example of this is the story of Maury Schwartz, the subject of the best selling book, Tuesdays with Maury. As Maury was dying with ALS, he shared profound insights about the art of living with his former student, Mitch Albom. One of Maury's key teachings was about the importance of non attachment in relationships. He said, the way you get meaning into your life is to devote yourself to loving others, devote yourself to your community around you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. Maury embodied this wisdom, maintaining deep, meaningful connections with his loved ones, even as he faced the ultimate loss, his own mortality. He was able to let go of the attachment to a permanent, unchanging relationship and instead cherish the fleeting time he had left. In doing so, he found a freedom and a richness in his final days that many will never experience. Area number 3, identity and ego. Perhaps the deepest and most pervasive form of attachment is our identification with our own fixed sense of self or ego. We cling tenaciously to our beliefs, opinions, roles, and self images, terrified of the prospect of change or uncertainty. We build up an elaborate narrative about who we are and desperately try to maintain that persona, even when it no longer serves us. The problem with this ego attachment is that it severely limits our freedom and growth. When we're trapped in a rigid self concept, we become inflexible and resistant to new possibilities. We get defensive when our beliefs are challenged and may even sabotage our own evolution in order to preserve the familiar sense of self. Ultimately, the constant need to protect and affirm our ego is a major source of stress, anxiety, and suffering. In contrast, the freedom that comes from letting go of the ego is profound. When we stop clinging to a fixed identity, we open ourselves up to the ever changing, multifaceted nature of who we truly are. We become more fluid, adaptable, and willing to learn and grow. We no longer feel the need to maintain a certain image or persona, allowing us to show up authentically in each moment. One beautiful example of this principle in action comes from the life of the spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle. In his best-selling book, The Power of Now, Tolle describes his own profound awakening in which he was able to let go of his lifelong identification with his troubled mind and ego. After a period of intense anxiety and depression, Tolle had a transformative realization. He said, I cannot live with myself any longer. This was the thought that kept repeating itself in my mind. In that moment, Tolle was able to step back and witness the chattering, self critical voice in his head rather than being consumed by it. He realized that his true nature was not this conditioned self, but rather a vast, spacious awareness that transcended the ego. This insight freed Tolle from the prison of his own mental constructs, allowing him to live with a profound sense of peace and presence. Tolle's story illustrates how letting go of our attachment to identity can unlock immense freedom and possibility. When we stop clinging to a fixed sense of self, we can tap into the boundless, ever evolving mystery of who we truly are. So, here are some questions to consider. Number 1, where in your life are you holding on tightly? Number 2, how is holding on so tightly serving you? Number 3, what would letting go look like? Number 4, what feels hard about that? And number 5, how would letting go change your life? Ultimately, the power of letting go lies in its ability to liberate us from the prison of our own attachments, whether it's our material possessions, our relationships, our rigid sense of self. The practice of non attachment frees us from the endless grasping and struggle that so often defines the human experience. When we let go, we stop expending psychic energy trying to control the uncontrollable. We make peace with the reality of impermanence, change, and uncertainty. And in doing so, we open ourselves up to a profound sense of freedom, resilience, and inner peace. This practice of purposely letting go is so important. It is part of my evening routine. I let go every single day because what my brain wants to do is hold on super tight. And I've noticed all the ways that keeps me stuck, keeps me trapped. It keeps me from moving forward. It keeps me in negative emotion, in pain, in misery, in suffering. Whereas letting go gives me so much freedom. It gives me peace. It gives me contentment. It's so important that I've just made it part of my daily routine. And I encourage you all to do the same. As Marianne Williamson once said, the spiritual journey is the unlearning of fear and the acceptance of love. The path of letting go is precisely this, the unlearning of our deep seated attachments and fears, and the radical acceptance of the ever changing nature of existence. It is a journey of expanding our awareness, cultivating equanimity, and falling in love with life in all its fleeting glory. So, if you find yourself burdened by the weight of your possessions, relationships, or sense of self, I invite you to consider the power of letting go. Experiment with holding your life more lightly, with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. You may just discover that the true freedom you've been seeking was there all along, waiting to be unlocked. Live free, love life. Thank you for watching this episode of Live Free, Love Life. Please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to like, comment, and share. See you next time.